If you design security architecture without understanding how real attackers operate, you are designing in theory. Attackers do not care about your policies. They do not respect your documentation. They do not follow your organizational charts. They exploit weaknesses. As an enterprise security architect, you must think beyond controls and begin thinking in adversarial terms. You must ask, if I were an attacker, where would I start? What would I target first? What trust assumptions could I abuse? Where are the hidden pathways? Which misconfigurations would give me leverage? Threat modeling and attack surface management force you to design against real-world threats, not abstract compliance requirements. Security architecture becomes powerful when it is informed by adversary behavior. Threat modeling begins with realism. Instead of assuming generic threats, you analyze who might target your organization, what motivates them, what capabilities do they possess, what assets are most valuable. For example, if you operate in the energy sector, you may face nation-state adversaries targeting operational disruption. If you operate in financial services, ransomware and fraud may be primary threats. If you manage sensitive intellectual property, espionage may be a concern. Threat modeling means mapping high-value assets, entry points, trust boundaries, escalation pathways, impact zones. For instance, if identity is your primary control plane, compromised credentials become your most realistic threat vector. Architectural design must respond accordingly. Strong identity governance, privileged access monitoring, continuous risk assessment, segmentation controls. Threat modeling transforms security from static protection into dynamic defense planning. One of the most powerful ways to align architecture with real-world threats is mapping controls against adversary tactics. The MITRE ATT&CK framework categorizes attacker behavior into techniques such as initial access, credential access, lateral movement, privilege escalation, command and control, data exfiltration. As an architect, you should ask, how does our architecture disrupt each of these tactics? For example, initial access may be mitigated through strong identity verification and phishing-resistant authentication. Credential access may be mitigated through least privilege, monitoring, and endpoint protections. Lateral movement may be constrained by microsegmentation. Exfiltration may be detected through DLP and behavioral analytics. MITRE alignment helps you evaluate architectural completeness. If your architecture addresses prevention but lacks detection for lateral movement, you have a gap. Threat-aligned architecture is more resilient than compliance-only architecture. Your attack surface includes public-facing applications, cloud storage services, PISA identity providers, VPN gateways, SaaS integrations, DevOps pipelines, third-party access points. Attack surface management requires visibility. You must know what assets are externally exposed, which services are internet-facing, which identities have excessive permissions, which cloud resources are misconfigured, which shadow IT systems exist. Without accurate asset inventory, architecture cannot defend effectively. For example, if a forgotten test environment is publicly accessible, attackers may exploit it as an entry point. Architectural discipline requires continuous asset discovery, external exposure monitoring, misconfiguration scanning, risk scoring. Attack surface management is not a one-time audit. It is continuous architectural hygiene. Ransomware remains one of the most disruptive threats to enterprises. Architectural resilience against ransomware requires layered thinking. You must design strong identity governance to prevent privilege abuse, segmentation to restrict lateral movement, immutable backups to protect data integrity, endpoint detection to identify encryption activity, centralized logging for rapid investigation. For example, if an attacker gains access to a standard user account, they should not easily escalate to domain administrator. If a domain controller is compromised, Segmentation should prevent access to backup infrastructure. If encryption activity begins, detection systems should trigger containment actions. Ransomware resilience is not one control. It is architectural cohesion across domains. Designing for ransomware means assuming it will happen and limiting its impact. Red team thinking focuses on attack. Blue team thinking focuses on defense. As an architect, you must integrate both perspectives. Red thinking asks, where are the trust gaps? What credentials are attractive? What misconfigurations exist? How can lateral movement occur? Blue thinking asks, how quickly can we detect anomalies? How fast can we isolate compromised systems? How do we log suspicious behavior? How do we contain impact? Architectural maturity comes from balancing red and blue perspectives. For example, if red analysis reveals that privileged accounts are rarely monitored, blue architecture must strengthen monitoring and alerting. If red exercises demonstrate phishing susceptibility, identity architecture must strengthen authentication. Red and blue insights should feed architectural roadmap updates. Threat modeling must evolve continuously. Traditional security often reacts to incidents. Proactive defense models anticipate adversary behavior. Proactive architecture includes continuous vulnerability management, behavioral analytics, threat intelligence integration, attack simulation exercises, automated response mechanisms. For example, if threat intelligence identifies increased exploitation of a particular vulnerability, proactive architecture may prioritize patching and monitoring for related indicators. If red team exercises reveal segmentation weaknesses, architecture must evolve accordingly. Proactive defense means designing for detection before incidents occur, closing exposure gaps early, monitoring abnormal patterns continuously, automating containment where safe. Architecture becomes adaptive. Static architecture becomes obsolete quickly. Adaptive architecture evolves with threat intelligence. Threat modeling should not occur only during application design. It should influence enterprise-level architecture decisions. For example, if threat modeling reveals identity compromise as the most likely entry vector, enterprise roadmap may prioritize privileged access modernization, conditional access enhancement, identity risk analytics, phishing-resistant authentication. If threat modeling reveals supply chain risk, architecture may prioritize SBOM enforcement, dependency validation, pipeline security hardening. Threat modeling informs strategic investment. It ensures you are solving relevant risks, not theoretical ones. Executives understand impact. They may not understand adversary techniques, but they understand downtime, financial loss, regulatory penalties, reputation damage. When presenting threat modeling results, translate findings into operational impact scenarios, financial risk exposure, regulatory consequences, recovery cost projections. For example, instead of saying lateral movement risk exists, say a single compromised user could escalate privileges and disrupt operations across multiple business units within hours. Context creates urgency. Clarity builds support. You must measure architectural exposure. Metrics may include number of externally exposed services, privileged account coverage, patch compliance rates, segmentation policy coverage, time to remediate critical vulnerabilities, detection coverage mapped to MITRE techniques. Measurement allows you to track improvement. Without metrics, threat management becomes reactive storytelling. With metrics, it becomes strategic oversight. Ask yourself, have you mapped your architecture to real-world adversary tactics? Do you know your full attack surface? Can you contain lateral movement effectively? Are ransomware scenarios rehearsed architecturally? Do red team insights influence architectural design? Threat modeling and attack surface management are not optional. They are the difference between theoretical security and operational resilience. Architects must think like adversaries and design accordingly. If this lecture helped you understand how to integrate threat modeling into enterprise security architecture, make sure you subscribe to this series. In the next lecture, you will explore how to design a target state enterprise security architecture and create a transformation roadmap. Like this video if you found it valuable. Comment below and tell me, does your organization design security based on real-world threats or just compliance requirements? Your journey toward mastering enterprise security architecture continues in the next session.